Hello, everyone. So, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about early social structure and string theories. Now, most of what I'm going to talk about in this video are going to be string theories of crime, and then I'll save the portion that talks about social structure for another video. However, this is all coming from chapter 6 in your textbook. So, in terms of string theories of crime, the assumptions that are made about human behavior regarding string theories of crime is that individuals' behaviors are influenced by their environment. Thus far this semester, we haven't necessarily yet discussed how people's behavior is influenced by their environment, but that is a central part of the argument that is being made by string theorists. The second assumption that is made by string theorists is that individuals' behavior is influenced by frustration associated with living in lower class environments or communities. The key piece here is that individuals' behavior is influenced by their emotional state, and specifically the emotion that string theorists are concerned with the most is frustration. There are other sub or less important negative emotions like anxiety and depression. But again, the central emotion here in this chapter that's being discussed is the emotion of anger and frustration, which is also known as strain. This perspective focuses a great deal of attention on differences among different groups of people. It disregards the argument that biology and psychology play a central role in criminal behavior and that crime is caused by the way that society is structurally organized. The main focus here, in terms of the structural organization of society, is to look at how society is constructed in such a way that it creates inequalities between different groups of people. And so we know that there are different groups of people who have inequality between them. So, for example, different educational groups have inequality. We know that people who have education on average tend to make more money and have higher incomes and therefore live at a higher socioeconomic status background than those who come from a lower socioeconomic background. And with that said, also, we know that this varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. And so, a central piece of looking at string theorists is to look at economic backgrounds, socioeconomic status backgrounds, and to examine specifically how those different backgrounds play a key part in creating issues and inequalities between different groups of people and frustrations between those people who come from the lower socioeconomic backgrounds. In terms of the intellectual origins of this perspective, the intellectual origins of this perspective, the string theories, as well as many of the other theories we'll discuss in this textbook, come from Durkheim. And Durkheim was the person who created and coined the term anomie. Now, anomie means a state of normlessness. And by normlessness, what Durkheim meant is valuelessness. So, whenever a group of people do not have a shared value system, then Durkheim would say that that group of people are suffering from anomie. Why are values and norms important for people, groups of people? Well, Durkheim would argue that if people do not have a shared value system and a shared belief system, then those people will not be able to get along with another. Those people will have conflict between these different groups that have different and sometimes conflicting value systems. We know that the United States is extremely diverse in terms of its values and beliefs between different groups of people. And Durkheim would argue that those differences, that diversity of thought, diversity of belief and values, creates conflict. And Durkheim argued that societies that as suffering from anomie will experience higher rates of time than those that aren't experiencing anomie. So, in terms of strain theories, as I stated, the focus is on frustration as a factor in criminal activity. Again, this frustration comes from the different value systems or the lack of shared value systems or normlessness that Durkheim called anomie. Now, several theorists came along and added a lot, or added details or different in terms of their definitions of anomie, but they all go back to conflict between different groups of people in a society. And so several strain theories were mentioned in this chapter, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'll address on the major ones here. So Merton created a strain theory, as well as Cohen and Cloward and Olin. Now, one of the primary or main strain theories that's been discussed in core criminological text has been Merton's strain theory or Merton's anomie theory, which was created in 1938. Merton is often considered the most influential thinker in criminology's history. And he spoke a lot about the breakdown of American society in the 1930s. Merton's work focused on the idea or the concept of the American dream. The American dream is a ethos. It is a guiding principle, according to Merton, that is shared by all people classified as American. It is a societal value system that promotes this idea that people who work hard and pay their dues will eventually achieve their material and monetary goals. So think about your own upbringing in the United States. In the United States, many people are taught from the age that they can talk and walk that the goal of their lives should be to reach the American dream, which essentially means to reach economic success, to obtain material wealth. All of us have dreams of having a high paying job and living in a nice neighborhood and driving a nice car and having money in our savings account, money to retire with, and being able to take lavish vacations. All of these things fall under the ethos or the societal value of the American dream. And along with those goals of material wealth that I just mentioned, the American dream also talks a lot about how we go about achieving the American dream. And specifically, what the American dream tells us is that if we work hard, if we educate ourselves, if we prepare ourselves and we never give up in the face of adversity, then the American dream of material wealth will be ours. But even with that said, according to Merton, there are several critiques that can be made about the United States and the American dream. The first critique is that our culture's requirement that people achieve success, i.e., wealth, is stronger than its requirement that they play by the rules to attain it, right? According to Merton, although society tells you to obtain material success, it doesn't necessarily tell you that it's undesirable for you to break rules and do things that are dishonest and even criminal in order to get there. The second critique is that there's a mismatch between our culture's universal success goals of achieving wealth and people's differential access to the legitimate means to achieving those goals. So, for example, if in order to obtain material success, I need to go to school, well, Isn't it unfair to tell me that I need to achieve success and then make access to going to school difficult? Because we know that people who have money in our society have greater access to education, specifically quality education, than those who do not have wealth. And so this mismatch between the goals of achieving wealth and then the means to be able to achieve that wealth, that creates frustration amongst those who do not have access. As I said before, according to Merton, everybody in the United States is socialized to believe in the American dream, no matter what economic class they come from, whether it's middle class, upper class, or lower class. The goal in this society is to achieve monetary success through the means of hard work. But the reality is that most poor people, when wealthy, even though they have been encouraged to believe in the American dream, even though poor people have been encouraged to also pursue hard work and education as a way of achieving the American dream, the majority of them will not reach that American dream. And because of this causes strain and frustration. Now, Merton's other critiques were that in the United States, our American society puts too much emphasis on the goal of material success, and people go to college to get more money as opposed to going to college for the love of knowledge. When lower class people see that the American dream is a lie, they will never achieve. They experience strain and frustration, and that strain leads to criminal activity. Now, I'm not going to go over it here, but Merton discusses 5 different ways in which people will adapt to the inability to achieve the American dream. And I want you all to review that in the textbook, but I'll list them out now. The first adaptation would be conformity. And the person who adapts to the disconnect between the American dream and the means to achieve the American dream is a conformist. That person will continue to strive for the goals of the American dream, and they'll also continue to access to do this through the means as well, or continue to believe in the means of achieving that American dream. Then the second adaptation is what's called innovation. Innovation, a person continues to support or endorse the American dream. And then in terms of the means, they will create their own means to attain that American dream, which is basically material success. And through innovation, sometimes they'll even employ illegal strategies or illegal tactics in order to achieve the American dream. The next is rebellion. With rebellion, the person who adapts that way will reject both the goals and the means of American society and replace it with their own goals and means. Then there is ritualism. With ritualism, a person will continue to engage in pursuing the goal of the American dream as well as the means to achieve that American dream, but they'll only be doing it in a very ritualistic way, which basically means that they don't necessarily believe that they will ever achieve the American dream. So this is the person who gets up every morning, goes to work in a very routine fashion, but in their heart of hearts, they don't necessarily believe that they will ever achieve the American dream. And then lastly, the last adaptation is retreatism, which basically means that this person gives up on both the goals of achieving material success or the American dream, as well as the means, and they just sort of just divorce themselves from reality. Your textbook says that most people who adapt to the contradiction between the American goal, the American dream goal, and the means to achieve it, most of those people will become substance users, whether it's drugs or alcohol. The last strain theory that I'd like to discuss is what's called the general strain theory. Agnew looked at Merton's strain theory, and he had several critiques. But his overall critique of Merton's strain theory is that Merton argues that the main source of strain and frustration in people's lives is economic. Again, their inability to achieve their economic goals or their American dream. Well, Agnew came along and said, well, this is a fine idea, but the problem with that idea is that it doesn't explain why people who have money still will commit crimes. And so he created the general strain theory in order to fill in that gap or that weakness in Merton's strain theory. Specifically, Agnew argued that there are non-economic sources of strain and frustration in people's lives, and that people sometimes will act out on those frustrations in ways that involve criminal behavior. So Agnew identified 3 categories of sources of strain in order to add to Merton's strain theory. The first source of strain, according to Agnew, was the failure to achieve one's goals. And by that, Agnew meant that this encompassed both economic and non-economic goals. So for example, not only just obtaining a 6-figure salary, but maybe even the goals that a person may have, right, to one day get married, right? Or the goals that a person may have, and a person may have to have perfect health, right? All of those are goals that are non-economic, but they could still strive. They could still create strain in people's lives. The second category of strain is what Agnew called noxious stimuli, and these are basically negative things being present in people's lives. So, for example, if you have a difficult boss, or if you have you have children and your children are unruly, right, or disobedient, all of these are negative things that could be present in a person's life, even a person having a terminal illness, right? All of these are things that are negative that, if presented in a person's life, they can create strain and frustration. This third and last criteria or category of strain that Agnew identified was what's called removal of positive stimuli. And according to Agnew, what he meant by that is the removal or the threat of removal of something that a person positively values. So, for example, if I value my marriage and my marriage is in threat or in danger of being removed from my life, then that could create strain. If I have a perfect 4.0 GPA and I'm in danger of losing that 4-point GPA based on a class that I'm taking, that would be an example of removal of positive stimuli. According to Agnew, removal of positive stimuli is considered to cause the most strain. Because when people have something that they value in this world and they're in danger of losing that thing, or they do lose that thing, then that can create frustration and strain. So these 3 categories of strain, according to Agnew, do a better job at explaining crime across the board, across different class groups. Now, your textbook identified several policy implications, and you see them listed here. And these are things that could be done. If we believe that strain causes crime, these are things that can be done to prevent that strain from causing crime. First, intervention programs for high-risk youth, right? These programs could be programs that help students to develop healthy coping mechanisms, right? Because strain and frustration and anger are things that you can't get away from in life. Well, if we can provide ways for young people or for people in general to deal with strain or stressful situations in a positive way, then that would help to reduce crime that comes about due to strain. Third, equalizing opportunities for success, making success, whether it be material success or social success, making success more accessible to people will be a way of reducing strain and also reducing crime. The fourth one, de-emphasizing material success goals, means instead of teaching people in the United States that success and material wealth are the most important things, maybe we should de-emphasize that and teach them that there are other things that are even more important than that. And then lastly, the last policy implication that was mentioned in your book was to re-emphasize playing by the rules. Teach people to strive for material success and wealth, but at the same time, also promote the idea that that should be done with respect to laws and rules. That people should not necessarily cut corners or bend rules in their quest for achieving material wealth. So these were my thoughts from this week's readings. There were some other smaller theories that were reviewed as well in this chapter that I'd like you all to read when you get a chance. But please do read over this textbook, and I will see you all later.